Okay, over to you, Sue.
Okay. So just getting the slideshow up. Now, is that how you want it, Tree? Is that all set for me to continue? Okay, great. So welcome. Spiritual teachers and gurus emphasize getting in touch with and becoming one with our higher self. From the many guidelines that have been taught, we'll look at the top 7 practical steps to purify and tune our vehicles of consciousness. That's our minds, hearts, and our bodies to become one with the consciousness of the divine self. First of all, I'd like to give credit to Kathy Gann. She's a Western District Director for the TSA, and for sharing the title of her talk. She spoke about 10 proven ways. And so I've chosen 7, and the top 2, she and I had the same. So I wanted to share her. She's not giving her talk anymore, and I'm so glad that I can use the title. I think it's a apropos one for all of our searching. So first of all, I'd like to define what the higher self is by starting with the levels of consciousness in a human being that Blavatsky gave us. So let's take a look at the chart from the bottom up. So the Sthula Sharira is the physical body and the body mind. Now, the body mind is the term that I use for the autonomic nervous system. It makes our heart beat, and it beats faster when we run. And it also includes the protective mechanisms of the body. Like when we pull our hand away from a hot stove, we don't even have to think about it. The body mind is also the storehouse of our habitual body movements, like when we're driving. We can be talking and thinking about anything else but driving, but if a red light comes on, we come to a perfect stop. So we need these habitual patterns in our lives, but the body mind also activates our defense mechanisms of the fight, flight, and freeze reaction through the amygdala. And so you can see the red dot on the picture. So the fight, flight, and freeze reactions are useful in fleeing from a threat, like getting under a table in an earthquake, but they're not useful when interacting with a family member because they're usually too strong with adrenaline and turn into amygdala hijack if a person gets easily irritated at their spouse, uses sarcasm, or raises their voice. Or on the other side, walks away in a huff or shuts down if upset. So that's the reason why some of the emotions can get triggered from the body mind. So moving back to the levels of consciousness, next up is the Linga Sharira, and that's the etheric double or the astral double. And it extends off the body, maybe a ½ inch to an inch, and it can be sensed in addition to the heat of our bodies. Some people can sense it or even off of our hands. Then we have prana, that's the vitality and energy within and coming off the body. And it's called chi in China and ki in Japan. And you probably have heard of the term Reiki. That's the universal energy of in Japan, that term, the prana. Then we have kama, that's the emotional body or the desire body. And kama with the mind, or manas, would be kama manas. And manas is our mental body, or it encompasses both our everyday mind, or kama manas, but the higher mind, which is buddhi manas. And buddhi is the field of intuition. So when we're using our higher reasoning, it's buddhi manas. And then Atman is the field of unity, the infinite divine, or the absolute. So this chart describes it a little easier what the spiritual higher self is, the absolute or the Atman. And just a comment, the Atman is, it's not my Atman and your Atman. Atman is in everything, in people, creatures, and our world. That's the breath of God, or the one breath. And then, of course, the intuition, the higher self, includes the higher mind also, receiving intuition and utilizing reason and wisdom. And then the personal everyday self is what we use to live in the world. Our lower mind is the everyday mind, and our emotions and our physical body and body mind. So to decide on the 7 best ways to get in touch with the higher self, I'd like to start with guidelines from spiritual teachings from around the world. And these will give you a taste of the various principles and instructions, and also how similar they are. So before COVID, I distributed this handout for people to compare the various guidelines all on one sheet. Now, we won't be using this handout, it's too small, but it would give people a way to easily see the commonalities of these teachings. And I'll be showing you one set of principles at a time, and I can make this handout available to you if you'd like. So as we look at these, see what you would pick out as the 7 most important ways to become your higher self. So I'd like to start with Patanjali and the Yoga Sutras, and from the 2nd century before current era. Now, Patanjali gave us 5 guidelines to live in the world, and you're going to see these are common. So the first one is nonviolence, ahimsa, and then truth-telling, satya, not stealing, and then sexual fidelity, brahmacharya, and then detachment or dispassion. So this is dispassion, detachment, not holding on to things, letting us flow throughout life. Now, this has the root of graha in there, and that is to grasp. And so with A before it, it means not grasping onto things or holding on to things. And so you're going to see a similar guideline to this as we proceed. Then Patanjali gave us 5 personal behaviors, niyamas, for our growth, to be clean and have emotional contentment, self-control, and that's eating right or using good social skills. Or another example might be a pregnant woman who's going to refrain from smoking or coffee even when she's pregnant. So that's self-control. And then self-study, swadhyaya. Now that's reading on our own, or also our own self-awareness and studying ourselves for improvement. Then, of course, self-surrender is surrendering our individual egos to the divine, letting go of our attachments, and also accepting our karma. So Patanjali gave 6 more guidelines for spiritual development. Those were grouped into the first 2. Then he said that asana was important, and that's the right frame of mind for meditation. Now, you may have heard asana referring to the pillow you might use in a yoga class for seating, but it's a larger frame of mind. And then there's getting into meditation, so breath control. And so you might have seen people use plugging one nostril and then exhaling, and then inhaling on the other side, exhaling again. Now that's pranayama exercises, but breath control is wider with right communication with all living creatures, because we use our breath for that. And then getting into further meditation, pratyahara, is withdrawal of attention from sense objects. And then deeper meditation is dharana, centering the mind on the self. Deeper than that is dhyana, or contemplation. And then samadhi is total absorption in the self. Now that's the deepest meditation, and there's levels of that even. So roughly 800 years later, Shankara, excuse me, or Shankaracharya. Now, Acharya is a respectful addition to his name, the wise one or the guru. So he taught some Hindu virtues. And the first one is Viveka. And that's realizing the difference between the real and the unreal. And so the real would be the infinite divine, and then the unreal is our everyday lives that change, and our bodies change, and things come into being like plants, and then they're gone. So that's realizing this difference, and it's a pretty important one. So I'm giving you a hint about what you might consider as useful in the with these techniques. So now, Viveka, realizing the real, I'd like to share with you what Blavatsky described as we might call it God or the infinite divine. And she says it's the one life, the omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, which transcends the power of human conception. It's unthinkable and unspeakable. So this essence cannot be defined. So Viveka is sensing the higher self versus the personal everyday self. So back to the Hindu virtues from Shankaracharya, the next he taught was Varaga, detachment. And it's similar to what Patanjali taught with aparigraha. Now, this is a very important one as well, this detachment. So that's another hint as to what I feel might be the 7 ways to become our higher self. And then Shankara described the 6 treasures. So calmness of mind, or Shama, self-restraint, and that's in our bodies and our emotions and our senses, with Dhamma. And those together bring the mind centered on Atman, starting with meditation, uparati, and then endurance. So that is very useful, particularly in meditation, where we're going to endure some time that we've set aside and not follow an impulse to get up and take care of something in the room or figure out our day's schedule. So it's this endurance will help us. And then concentration, or the one-pointed mind, samadhana, and then faith, that's shraddha, that's confidence that what we're doing will aid us both in dealing with issues in our lives, but also in our spiritual growth, doing the best we can in our families and all we have to deal with. Lastly, his final one was love, or unity with Atman, or the desire to have this union with Atman, mumukshutvam. Then I'd like to move to Christianity and Judaism, and the Quran is very similar. And so it starts with the 10 commandments of the first, I am the Lord thy God, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Now, this is very similar to the Atman with theosophical teachings and the Viveka, the knowing the difference between God or our higher self with Atman and then our everyday world. And then there's another one similar to the meditation and rules for our behavior. Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain. In other words, for our own emotional release. Then honor the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Again, potentially for meditation. Then honor thy father and thy mother. Then you'll see similar ones here. Thou shalt not kill, or commit adultery, or steal, or bear false witness against thy neighbor, don't lie. And then thou shalt not covet or be jealous of thy neighbor or anything of thy neighbors. So you can hear again this not holding on to things or being jealous. That's detachment. What other people have is theirs, and we're just concerned about ourselves and our being grateful for our lives, and so not having jealousy or covet feelings. So then I'd like to shift to Buddhism, the Noble Eightfold Path. And so I include this little phrase after the arrows because it describes the principle so perfectly. So right view is seeing things in the right way, leading to understanding and wisdom. Right intention, resolving to do right, leads to divine inclination. Right speech, speaking or thinking properly, and it speaks to truth. So you can hear some of the similarities with telling the truth. Right action is appropriate behavior, leading to goodwill. Right livelihood is earning our income in ethical ways, and it leads to sharing. Right effort leads to the highest outcome. Right mindfulness is being aware of what we're doing and not acting unconsciously, and it leads to purposeful living. And right concentration leads to the absorption of in the unity of all. So this is with meditation. One theosophical book I'm sure many of you are familiar with was given to us by Blavatsky, The Voice of the Silence. And in it are the paramitas of Buddhism. And they're just beautiful. I want to include them in our discussion today of becoming one with the higher self. And she adds Varagas that you'll see. There's often 6 with Buddhism. So the paramitas start with charity, Donna. That's generosity and helpfulness. And then moral conduct, Sheila. And then with the emotions, Kashanti, patience, sweet, which naught can ruffle. And then here's the detachment, Varaga, desirelessness. And then valor. Now that's heroism and dauntless energy that fights for truth. And so we need this heroism sometimes within ourselves when we're going to follow our conscience. Even if others are doing something illegal or against our conscience, it takes heroism to stick with that. Contemplation or dhyana, so that's meditation, and then prajna is the divine wisdom of the self. So again, similarities. Now I'd like to move to Taoism from China, and that's a picture of Lao Tzu, the sage, or maybe even the accumulation of all the wisdom. So it's the teacher, and you'll see similar guidelines. Don't kill or steal or engage in sexual misconduct. Don't speak falsely. Don't get intoxicated, but always think of pure conduct. Now, to add to these concepts, Chinese philosophy also has the concept of the Tao, and it's like the Atman or Blavatsky's one life. And the Tao is unnameable. Then there's another wonderful concept of Wei, Wu, Wei, doing, not doing is what that means. And that's going with the flow with detachment and acceptance. That's knowing what we're dealing with is where we're supposed to be. Then the last wonderful principle of the Taoism is the uncarved block. Now it represents a return to unity and alignment with the Tao or the Atman. So what this means is we start our existences in our primordial condition as an uncarved block. Then as we develop our personalities, aspects that are both good and maybe not so good over many lifetimes, we carve into the block, and this represents attributes about ourselves from our everyday experience. Now, when we want to become one with the higher self, we are trying to get back to the uncarved block through detachment and through eliminating desire and using self-purification and getting rid of those defense mechanisms like the amygdala hijack and other behaviors that may get in our way. So this gives you an introduction of the various guidelines from around the world. So the first proven way to become your higher self, and I gave you a hint about this, what I've picked is from Shankaracharya, Viveka, and that's the first of the Hindu virtues. Now, I'd just like to comment, Shankara's book, The Crest Jewel of Wisdom, or Viveka Chudamani, is a wonderful book to read. It's short, very clear, easy to understand. So he goes into Viveka, which is discernment and judgment to discriminate between the real and the unreal, between our everyday world and the Atman. Now, this is done with the perspective of the higher mind. So we use discernment and discrimination every day in our lives as we pick right from wrong, following our conscience or rules of behavior, or our own integrity. Or we may discriminate how much money we spend or what we eat, so maybe not having too much sugar. So Viveka is sensing the Atman or the God in everything, or the unity of life. And this is that discernment that we use all the time. So now this Viveka and realizing the Atman is similar to Christianity's and Judaism's the one God, the Chinese Tao, Blavatsky's one life, and in the Paramitas, the divine reality or prajna, and this is also right view in Buddhism. So Viveka gives us this discrimination to decide if we want to follow the golden rule. Now that's doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. That's a principle of unity. Or let our defenses come up where we resist changing our behavior, or if we're ignoring how we're coming across to others. So I'd like to share a story that exemplifies this discrimination. And it's a story that was written in the Reader's Digest in the 60s. And it's an article about the US government's foremost expert of discerning counterfeit money. His word was the final word. And the interviewer asked him how he learned how to do this. Did he study all sorts of counterfeit money? And he said, no, he spent his time studying real money so that when something was fake, he could spot it in an instant. So if we surround ourselves with the finest ideas, inspiring art, good music, and people who display qualities of selflessness with us and our family and friends, we can develop ourselves to become little by little our higher self. So I'd like to share another story that exemplifies this discrimination of Viveka. And it's called The Concubine in the Mirror. And it's from Japan. Once upon a time, there was a young man who loved his parents very much. He grew up, left home, and met a young woman whom he fell in love with and married. But shortly afterward, his father died, and he grieved for him very much. One day he had to go to Tokyo on business, and after he conducted his work, as he was leaving to return home, he passed by a mirror shop. Wondering what unusual things were sold there, he went in to look around. As he gazed into one of the mirrors, he was surprised to find his father there. So he bought the mirror, took it home, and put it in his prayer room and prayed before it every day. Now his wife started wondering why he was spending so much time in his prayer room and decided to see for herself. As she looked in the mirror, she saw the face of a young woman looking back at her, and she became really angry and accused her husband of bringing a concubine home and keeping her inside a gold frame. But the young man replied that it was his dead father in the mirror, but the wife was convinced otherwise. As they were arguing, a nun came by, heard the dispute, and offered to help. She looked in the mirror, saw her reflection, and turned to the couple and said that the woman had repented and become a nun so the wife could pardon her. And with that, the argument ended. So this demonstrates the teaching of Viveka, or discrimination. And it's also illustrated in the ancient Greek aphorism, know thyself, in the temple of Apollo in Greece. Another well-known saying that makes the same point comes from Shakespeare in Hamlet. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night the day, thou canst not then be false to any man. So I'd like to move to the second proven way to become your higher self, and I gave you a hint about this one that I've chosen, and it's Varaga. Now, we've seen this quality spoken about in many of the teachings, and it refers to a detachment or a desirelessness that we can develop. And the word literally means uncoloredness from the root raga, which means emotionally tinged color. So with the prefix, Varaga means seeing the world uncolored by our emotions. Now, we have many expressions in our day-to-day language that relate color to our emotions, and you've all heard of seeing the world through rose-colored glasses, having a cheerfulness or an optimism. Another expression, feeling in the pink, feeling healthy and happy. And I love that pink suit that the woman is wearing. Or the difficult feeling of envy, green with envy, or feeling jealousy. And this is going to be helped by Varaga. Or having the blues, if we're sad or melancholy. Or worse yet, being in a black mood, if we're depressed, angry, or irritable. Or another difficult feeling is seeing red, if we have sudden anger that comes up and gets the better of us. So Varaga is seeing people, things, and events uncolored by our emotions and having a state of acceptance, which brings peace and other positive feelings. And it prevents us from being brought down and disappointed when something doesn't turn out the way we hoped. It's an easygoingness in life. So as I mentioned, Varaga is also the second virtue of Shankaracharya, one of the paramitas of Buddhism, and in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, aparagraha, not grasping, And then, of course, thou shalt not covet in the 10 commandments. So you can see how common of a principle it is. So it's useful to keep it in mind. And I guarantee you'll feel better too. Now, Varaga doesn't mean we shouldn't appreciate the pleasures of the senses. We can still enjoy eating good food or hearing wonderful music or being with friends and family. It just means not to get attached. This slide says it well. It asks whether a monk can use email, and the response is yes, but with no attachments. So because life has so much change, we need to be accepting of what comes our way. So a story that relates to this is called Good Fortune, which relates to Varaga. Once upon a time, there was a Russian farmer whose horse ran away, and the neighbors all said how sorry they were for his bad luck. But the neighbor said, "How do you know this isn't good fortune?" The next day, the horse came back with another horse, and the neighbors said how lucky the man was for his good fortune. But the wise farmer said, "How do you know this is good fortune?" So the farmer gave the second horse to his son, who, as he was trying to train it, was bucked off and he landed and broke his leg. Once again, the neighbors all said how sorry they were for the man's bad luck. But he said, "How do you know this isn't good fortune?" Soon after, all able-bodied men were conscripted into the army and 90% were killed. And the neighbors again said how lucky the farmer was that his son didn't have to go to war. "And how do you know this is good fortune?" the farmer replied. Now, this is the end of the story, but it really could go on. And maybe the farmer was really not easy to get along with, or the son was really crabby. So the key is having detachment or varaga in our lives and accepting the circumstances that we are in, doing our best to improve and all, or to change those circumstances, but accepting the things we can't control. So moving to the third proven way to become your higher self. And what I've decided to do was use the levels of consciousness as a guide and find a quality that relates to each one. We'll start with the physical body, and what I've chosen is Dharma. Now that's the second of Shankara's 6 treasures, and it's self-restraint. Relates to the body. Now this word has a connotation of power and strength as we control the senses of our body and the desires that come up with them and the subsequent behaviors that arise. So this power and strength is when we might subjugate our senses when we're trying to meditate, or when we're going to control ourselves from having strong emotions like of anger. And it also means conquering. That's our unfettered actions or strong passions, which we may regret, like the amygdala hijack, or on the other side, spending too much money. Then it has a connotation of endurance as we withstand the self-denial to act in ways that we decide or in proper ways. We hold ourselves back from using sarcasm or having a negative judgment about someone. Another way that Dharma is defined is peaceful action. So this slide shows how peaceful action is important around the world. And the book on the left is from Russia. Then the peaceful classroom in action on the right, and then of course the peaceful actions platform. So in Dharma, in the guidelines that are taught, it includes nonviolence. That's with our bodies again and our physical aspect, not lying and telling the truth, and not stealing. And it all boils down to Dhamma, or right action, from Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. So I'd like to share a story that exemplifies Dhamma, peaceful right action, and it's a story of Farmer Fleming, and it's a true story. Farmer Fleming was a poor Scottish farmer. One day while working in his field, he heard a cry for help coming from a nearby bog, and he immediately stopped what he was doing and ran to the bog. There, mired to his waist in black muck, was a terrified boy, screaming and struggling to free himself. And Farmer Fleming saved the lad from what could have been his death. And the boy was very grateful. The next day, a fancy carriage pulled up to the Scotsman's sparse surroundings, and an elegantly dressed nobleman stepped out and introduced himself as the father of the boy Farmer Fleming had saved. And the nobleman said, "I want to repay you for saving my son." But the nobleman said, "No, I can't accept payment for what I did." Excuse me, the farmer said that, and he waved off the offer from the nobleman. At that moment, the farmer's son came to the door of the family's home. "Is that your son?" the nobleman asked. "Yes," the farmer replied proudly. "I'll make you a deal," the nobleman said. "Let me provide your son with the same level of education that my son will enjoy. If the lad is anything like his father, he'll no doubt grow to be a man we will both be proud of." And that he did. He attended the very best schools and graduated from St. Mary's Hospital Medical. Excuse me, I get choked up with this story. I'm already anticipating it. So he graduated from the medical school and went on to become known throughout the world as the noted Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin. Years afterward, the son of the nobleman who earlier had been saved from the bog was stricken with pneumonia. And what saved his, life this time was penicillin. And the name of the nobleman, Lord Randolph Churchill. And his son's name, Sir Winston Churchill. So what goes around comes around. Sometimes these stories, and you all understand, I'm sure. So anyway, wonderful story, very touching to the heart. So I'd like to move to the fourth proven way to become your higher self. And again, I'd like to use the levels of consciousness and pick one that applies to the emotions. And I've decided on Donna, charity or love immortal. And that's the first paramita of Buddhism. Now, the word Donna comes from the same root as our word donation. So it's a givingness. With charity, it means showing kindness, understanding, tolerance, and a helping of others. Donna corresponds to the third paramita, Kshanti, or patience sweet which naught can ruffle. And it also relates to the fourth commandment, honoring thy father and thy mother. showing love and helping them. And also to the second commandment, do not take the Lord's name in vain, not to condemn anyone with anger or swear. And so with our work on the emotions to become one with the higher self, it relates to santosha, or contentment, from Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the second guideline. And the slide says contentment is a choice, and we all have the power to become that. Donna, or charity, relates to right effort, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path, our effort, and that's our controlling our emotions. And it relates to the fifth paramita, virya, heroism and courage. Now we need virya, as I mentioned before, if we hear gossip and don't want to repeat it. Or even more so, this courage needs to come if we hear a joke or a put down about somebody or a particular group of people, and we might say that we don't feel it's right to say that, and it takes courage, and this shows love for others. So Donna also relates to Tiksha, the fourth of Shankara's 6 treasures. Now that's in the endurance, and that's not rebelling or grumbling, even if others do. Showing a cheerfulness about life and the circumstances that come up, even if we feel defeated. Now we can feel these feelings and acknowledge them and look at them, but allowing us to move into tiksha, this endurance, to keep going, or just having perseverance. Now this also helps others as we work to that. Now this Donna for the emotions also relates to Shraddha, and that's the 6th of Shankara's treasures. Now that's faith or confidence we're on the right path and will benefit from whatever we're going through or doing. So it helps us deal with our emotions by the trust and knowing that something is right. And it's useful for us to use as we live through these experiences. All of these guidelines help us deal with our emotions and relate to Donna, or love immortal. So I'd like to share a story dealing with the emotions and how they can give us some trouble. And this is called The Spider and the Hawk, and it's a Native American legend. Once upon a time, a spider made friends with a hawk. And one day the spider decided he wanted to see the world from above. And he asked the hawk if he could take a ride on his back. And the hawk agreed. And the spider enjoyed the view, but fairly quickly he became bored. So he decided to have some fun at the hawk's expense. Now there's no cuss words in the Sioux language, but they have a sign that indicates that a put down for someone. So when the hawk encountered another bird, maybe a magpie or an eagle, the spider made the sign that the hawk was quite a stupid fellow. And now the spider thought the hawk would never know because he was sitting behind his head. But when the hawk saw its shadow and the spider making fun of him, to put an end to it, the hawk suddenly turned over so that the spider fell off. And he landed inside the crack of a hollow old tree. And it started to rain, and because the tree was very dry, it soaked up water easily and swelled, and it started to crush the spider to death. And the spider cried out, "Why do I do these things? Forgive me, Great Spirit, for making fun of the hawk." The spider felt very small indeed because of his pride and wickedness. And his humility made him so small, he was able to crawl out of the stump. So the moral of the story is a little humility, self-knowledge, and prayer can be a good thing sometimes. So moving to the fifth proven way to become your higher self and using the levels of consciousness, I'm picking a guideline that goes with manas, or the mind. And what I've picked is Shama, the first of 6 treasures of Shankara. Now, this is calmness of mind, a stillness, equanimity, and tranquility in our lives. Now, Shama literally means level or even. So it is intentionally cultivating an inner attitude of peace and calm, which helps us not be swayed or thrown off our center or our levelness by our emotions or reactions to things going on around us. Just as we hold our minds still and focused as we pick up broken glass, we need to practice holding our minds in a state of quietude where we don't get upset by our emotions or so deeply frustrated by memories or other things that we may recall. There's a wonderful African proverb that emphasizes the same thing. Talking stops when walking through thorns. This proverb says that we need to be mindful of how we're walking so we don't get stuck with a thorn, just as we need to be mindful of what we let enter our minds. Shama corresponds with right intention of Buddhism, in that when we intend to control our thinking, we can do it. Wayne Dyer, the American self-help and spiritual teacher, said, "Our intention creates our reality." And there's really a lot of power with intention because it hooks in with the will. Shankaracharya taught us that the mind is the commander of the senses. So the senses are commonly what prompt us to action from desire, any other emotions that get stimulated from our bodies. Like if we're waking up from sleeping not well on a saggy bed, the body's senses are maybe discomfort, which prompt our emotions. I don't like it. And then it leads to our mind. We need to get another bed. So that's our mind as the commander. So if we're looking for a wonderful experience or a trip or going to a concert, it's kama manas. That's our desire mind. But our awareness can keep our minds and emotion calm. Now, we may need to go after the new bed, but if we're going to be upset by our emotions or having too many desires, that's when we can use this calmness of mind with Shama. The mind then is controlled and quiet, so it can be centered on Atman. This is Uparati, the mind centered on Atman. That's the third of Shankara's 6 treasures. As we discussed earlier, Varaga is needed to help us attain Shama, or the quiet mind. As we let go of our attachments, as the slide shows, we can be freed from things that bog our minds down, like old resentments that just pop up on their own. We can let them go and have them slip through our fingers, just like sand. Then our minds can be quiet, and there's such a wonderful peace from a tranquil mind. Shama also corresponds to Patanjali's 4th guideline, Swadhyaya, And that's self-study of spiritual works, but it also can include studying ourselves and what comes into our minds, and also how we behave, so we can decide what to think and how to act. And it takes practice, but we can do this. I'd like to share a story that exemplifies how important it is to control what we think. And it's two monks on a journey. A senior monk and a junior monk were traveling together. At one point, they came to a river with a strong current. As the monks were preparing to cross the river, a young, beautiful woman approached them and asked if they could help her cross to the other side. Now, the two monks glanced at one another because they had taken vows never to touch a woman. Then, without a word, the older monk picked up and carried the young woman across the river on his back. Then he gently placed her on the other side and went about his journey. The younger monk could not believe what had just happened. After rejoining his companion, he was speechless, and an hour passed without a word between them. 2 more hours passed, and the younger monk was still thinking about what had happened. And finally, after 3 hours, he finally could not contain himself any longer, and he blurted out, "As monks were not permitted to touch a woman, how could you carry that woman on your back?" And the older monk looked at him compassionately and replied, "Brother, I set her down at the side of the river many hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" Again, Shama, or calmness of mind, is the key. So the sixth proven way to become your higher self, and corresponding to the levels of consciousness and buddhi, are intuitional, body. I've chosen samadhana, the fifth of the 6 treasures of Shankara, concentration on pure being and becoming one-pointed. Now, this is accessed through meditation and its single-minded focus. In meditation, Shankara says that we start with pratyahara, or withdrawal of attention from sense objects. Now, the word pratyahara comes from the root prati, which means to withdraw, and ahara, which means food, or anything that consumes our minds, such as our bodies. Maybe when we're trying to meditate, we want to get comfortable, or what we're needing to accomplish when we're done meditating. So we withdraw our attention away from all of that. And we continue with self-surrender to our higher self with Ishvara Pranidhana. And that's from Patanjali's 5th guideline. And that's Ishvara is our higher self, and Pranidhana is fixing our mind on the higher self. And that's letting go of everything except our internal experience of meditation. Samadhana means complete concentration on the divine. And if we do this often in meditation, it improves our ability to meditate the next time, as well as it influences our normal way of functioning in the world. And we're more in touch with our higher self. And it corresponds to right mindfulness of Buddhism and right concentration. Samadhana also corresponds to dharana, or concentration, and dhyana, which is deeper meditation or contemplation from Patanjali. And the theosophical writer, Clara Codd, wrote a book, The Way of the Disciple. It's a wonderful book. And in it, she discusses Shankara's Hindu virtues and relates them to our everyday lives. And it's excellent, easy to read, not too long, and I totally recommend it. She gives excellent advice to begin meditation. She says, take a short time in the morning as it sets a rhythm for the whole day when you can be still and alone. Let your mind seek and ponder to the invisible potencies around and within you. When your mind is truly quiet, it allows you to perceive the impressions from the higher self. So this helps us to get in touch with our higher self. That's the sixth proven way. And then lastly, moving to the seventh proven way to become your higher self. And I've picked one to correspond with the Atman, the infinite divine. And what I've chosen is love or mumukshutva. That's the fourth or the last of Shankaracharya's Hindu virtues. And it's devotion and desire for union with the higher self. And it corresponds with samadhi, the eighth of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now, this is a high state of meditation and total absorption in the self. And mumukshutva also includes a strong desire and intention to unite with Atman and get off the rounds of births and deaths through reincarnation. Now, the word samadhi is a compound word that comes from two words, the first being Shama, the calm mind, which we talked about. That's in the fifth proven way to become your higher self. And D-H-I, or Dahi, with a little puff of air on the H. And that's referring to the intuition or our higher mind. This slide shows devout nuns and a monk who were dedicated to prayer and meditation in Christianity, Saints Catherine of Siena and Teresa of Avila, and then Saint John of the Cross. Now, there are many others, including Shankara and Patanjali and Buddha, who shows his love and unity every year when he blesses us at the festival of Wesak. And these pictures show his aura and the love flowing to us. So lastly, from these quotes from Krishnamurti, the spiritual teacher who at 14 wrote At the Feet of the Master, he writes about meditation in his other books as well about becoming one with the higher self. And he wrote, standing at the beach with the waves and the wind coming in, you feel there is nothing between you and the sky. You are lost in the beauty. You see not only with your eyes, but with your heart. This openness is meditation. There is no resistance, no barrier. Meditation is the explosion of love. This love knows no separation. To it, far is near. It is a state of love when and which all division ceases. The beauty of love is not in you or outside you, but everywhere. So this completes the 7 proven ways to become your higher self. And to summarize, they were firstly, viveka, that's discernment between the real or the Atman and the unreal, our everyday lives. Second was Varaga, desirelessness and non-attachment. Then for the mind, Dharma, that is self-restraint and peaceful action with our bodies. So Dhamma is the lowest level, the physical body of the levels of consciousness. And then for the emotions, I've picked Donna, and that's charity and love, immortal. And then for the mind, I picked Shama, that's the calmness of mind, equanimity. And then relating to Buddhi, the sixth level of consciousness, that's samadhana, concentration on pure being and meditation. And then lastly, love or mumukshutvam, and that's desire of becoming one with the Atman. So thank you for listening to the 7 proven ways to become your higher self. So of course, are there comments or questions or things you want to speak about? Oh, I might add that each of these guidelines could be a whole talk. So I've condensed it and it's quite dense, but I tried to help you see the reason why I brought it up and to pick the 7 top features. Now, you might even disagree with some of these. So what are your thoughts?
I have a question. I want to ask, you made the statement about the breath, that we communicate with the breath, communicate, I think you said animals.
Oh, sure.
And I just wanted you to expand on, if you would expand on that a bit.
Sure, that comes from the Hinduism's one breath, and this is the breath of which we all are a part. And so that's what that's related to, this oneness. And so then pranayama can be exercises like to control our breathing. So when we breathe in and out of one side of our nostril and then switch to the other side, it tends to kind of balance our minds, because if we've been very active, then we need to calm and relax. Or if we've been pretty sedentary or sleeping, then we need to kind of get the balance back where we have our mind alert and awake. So that's the breath control, or the breath. And so we use our breath to communicate to people, but how we treat animals in our world, you know, the Theosophical Order of Service and helping animals, or even the environment, how we treat living plants, forests, and this kind of thing, as well as the natural world of minerals. So that's that breath control, and that the one breath, it relates to that. And there's
how are we communicating? I'm not quite clear how we're communicating with our breath. That's
okay,
what
so the breath, we form words with our breath.
Okay.
We can huff and puff if we're angry, with anger, if with our breath, you know, we can show frustration. So that's how that relates with that. And then there's even in Judaism, the ruach, R-U-A-C-H, that's the breath of life. And of course, in creation stories from around the world, God breathed the breath of life into them. They're very common in creation stories, not only in Christianity. The breath of God is very common. So this is related to that breath. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes, Sue, as you were going through the 7 proven ways, I realized that a lot of them can be found in the little book At the Feet of the Master.
Yes.
The first 2 are basically the same, and the last one, love, is the 7th one. And then the 3rd chapter talks about calmness, control of the mind, and others. Do you have any comments on that?
Oh, I think you're right on. At the Feet of the Master is so related to humans and the things that come up in our lives. And it gives us real clear guidelines. And I think that At the Feet of the Master also shows the humanness of Krishnamurti and the understanding of what we struggle with our emotions and with our families and all. Now, what do you think about that, John? What are your comments yourself about that?
Well, I've been looking at it that way in terms of the 7 ways, but your presentation in terms of looking at all the various religions and some of the philosophies of the East and also of the West, and combining them into 7 ways, I thought was excellent. But then I related that, oh, some of these are already found in a little book. So that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, that's fabulous. See, you're using your Buddhi manas there, seeing that, having that intuitional connection and seeing this commonality, and how At the Feet of the Master really describes that for us. And it's so wonderful. It's such a small little book, easy to read and reread.
Okay.
Yeah, no, good point.
So there were a comment made by Jamshed in the chat. He said that thank you for the excellent presentation. The content is very enlightening. And you must also be a techie, as a physical presentation were pleasing to the eye and a treat to watch and listen.
Well, I would love to be a techie, but I'm a mental health therapist. I do family, marital, and individual therapy. And so I've learned the computer and Zoom. So, and then with COVID, since I couldn't meet with people in my office anymore, doing the counseling, I shifted to Zoom, which was wonderful because I could still work with people, and there was a strong need with the stress that everyone was under and the fears and all. So I could still work with people, and I got familiar with Zoom and the sharing of the screen and that kind of thing. But I wish I had more that, maybe from some of Tree's expertise. I wish I could transplant that in my brain.
Actually, I couldn't. I don't have the artistic skill like you do, because all the image that you presented, especially I like the one with the guy holding his face, looking back at himself. Oh my goodness, that's captured perfectly.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to ask, is it possible for you to, you remember you had a one-page document that compare all that concept, commandment, the 10 commandments and so on. Is it possible for you to email me, someone to, that we can post it somewhere on our website?
Sure. I can send it to you. And so there's my email address in the chat, suegprescott@gmail.com. And I'm happy to share with you the whole talk if you want, because I know it's quite dense. There's a lot in there, and or any of the slides. That's quite a lot to share by email, but I'm happy to pass that handout on. And then you can also be in touch with me through that. So,
yeah, I love the way that you compare all the religions and all the philosophy from the different origins, and then putting them together and tying them back into the 7 principle in theosophy. I mean, it's a new way of looking at it that I haven't actually seen before, and it's very holistic, I would say.
well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. As I was developing it, it just kind of came from my intuition or whatever, divine guidance, to kind of organize it this way. And so I just really want to encourage you all with that. I've worked to develop this. I'm just inching along on the path, just like anybody else. But through my young involvement with Harry Van Gelder, Dora Kuntz's brother, with the meditation groups at camp. And so he would emphasize meditation, and I would start maybe doing the Gayatri that he taught us. That's the Hindu or the ancient chant from the Rig Veda, I believe, from Hinduism. But, and I might do it once a year as I started out, or kind of whenever I thought of it. And then it gradually became more and more year by year into a practice that I do. So anyway, then what you can find is there's quite a lot of intuition available to you. Now, I know this to be true from all of my clients who tell me things like, well, and as I was thinking about that, the thought hit me. Or when they're saying, when I'm all stewing over my emotions and all, it dawned on me. So that's that insight from Buddhi, and that we can, even in our most difficult times, can have these insights, and that there's a pausing quality that really helps that. So, and that's probably the biggest thing I want to offer to people is my years of experience with this, and it works. You can keep developing this, but it is like, again, through my experience, we're inching along. Be nice to have all the knowledge, but we'll get there.
Yeah, and by the way, a good point on your presentation I would like to point out is the way that you do the storytelling. I think that's very compelling, especially the story of Winston Churchill and penicillin.
Yes.
You know, that I did not know about that at all. That is very good.
Well, I hope it's okay. I kept breaking up with the tears because of the significance of it all. And then, of course, the world and World War II. And I have a friend who it's really, if I go to a movie with her or a family member or whatever, if there's a part that comes where there might be tears in a movie or something, a family member may look to me to see if I'm crying, and of course I am. But I always say to the person, well, you knew it, you were having tears stimulated even if you weren't crying. So I think everybody can relate to this. This is that Atman, this oneness that we all are a part of, when we can understand the significance, and it affects our emotions. In fact, just another quick comment, Harry Van Gelder, that meditation teacher, he would meditate with us, and he would have tears in his eyes as he meditated because of his connection to the higher planes. And he said there's a release that comes, and it's from the beauty. And it's not necessarily grief, it's beauty and this expansiveness. So
A question about that.
Sure.
And that is, sometimes people have been extremely nice to me or kind or said something and it touched me and I had tears. Is that the same thing?
Yes, yes, for sure. Or sometimes watching an athletic competition, maybe skaters, just doing a beautiful, or dancing, you can get choked up watching something that's just beautiful. So there's a show called So You Think You Can Dance. And sometimes the artistry of the dancing touches you and you cry. Now, Farida, I don't want to forget that miss that your hand is up. So
Yes,
if you
okay.
had a question, go ahead.
Yeah, when the Olympics, when the winner comes on the stage, that's the time I cry. Or when in a movie, when a child is lost, I don't cry, but when the child is found, and about the story of the penicillin, I'm an English teacher, English to newcomers, and I have a book called Stories from the World of the World. And this particular story about penicillin, I was reading that and crying, and the students are saying, "Teacher, are you crying? Why are you crying? It's a happy story." But yes, it does that to you. Yeah. And excellent presentation. And I've written in the chat that I'm sure you can go on for a whole day per each of the principles. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
don't know where you get all the slides from. They're matching your words so accurately. The sand falling off, when you said about let go, the sand falling off your fingers. It's amazing. Very nicely done. Thank you very much.
Oh, well, you're sure welcome. I do enjoy looking on the internet for images. And so there's a ton of them. And I haven't put the copy, whatever, the rights or the authors or the artists. Some of them I couldn't find, so I actually let it go, and you can look at them up. They're fabulous pictures off the internet that I got. So yeah, they're great and really augment. Well, plus I think it helps. The picture tells 1,000 words. So when you see a picture, it impacts people, and it's kind of goes in and
Thank you.
touches. Oh, you're sure welcome.
I have one question for you, Sue. I believe it was the third one that you mentioned, Dharma, right? Self-restraint.
Yes.
Is that the same like the will? Kind of like building up your will to control, your emotion and stuff like that?
Well, Dhamma relates more with self-restraint, and that's kind of with our bodies, but it's using the will, which people may say comes from buddhi, our intuition and our higher levels of consciousness. And so, but we can see these levels of consciousness are all blended together. Theosophy teaches them, and they're kind of like these levels, like shelves, for books, but we're using all of them all the time. And so the will is there, or when we're helping someone maybe pick up something that just dropped out of their hands, we're using our bodies to do that. We're using our emotions of caring for the person, even a stranger. And then we're using the love, the Atman, that oneness. We would want someone to help us if we maybe wouldn't, but we just offer this. It just happens out of people. And I'm sure you can recall news stories where people just rush to help. And in an accident, or someone is, in a water and they're drowning and they need help, people just rush in. In fact, I saw a presentation on Nova on PBS, and the researcher was, a biologist and a PhD and everything, researching why do people do this? And she looked at their brains, and they have a larger amygdala. Now that's that fight, flight, and freeze, but it was also combined with the wise mind, or the higher mind up above, for this action and the adrenaline. So anyway, so that's a perfect example. The amygdala is lower, and I won't be able to find my slide, but I work with clients all the time. And so you can see the brain, and then the amygdala is red there. And that can be the fight, flight, and freeze of the amygdala. But then when we're doing it for others, that involves this higher part of our brain, the third eye and the pineal or pineal gland, and this higher awareness. So you can see we're using our whole brain and all of these levels of consciousness all the time. So it's a cool thing, but Blavatsky helped us a lot by breaking it down. And because our emotions are so needed, but they can really grip our minds. And then in counseling, we call that the emotion mind, where we might be full of anger, or even love, where we might do things inappropriately. Maybe in a large auditorium, we're not supposed to shriek with delight when someone we haven't seen for a long time comes in. So then that's when we use self-restraint and not interrupt the speaker. I hope it's clear when I'm saying I'm really going into a lot of things all at once. I don't mean to overwhelm you.
So I noticed in your presentation, you translated majority of the the Sanskrit word into English, so that English speaker could understand them. Is there a particular glossary, a dictionary of the Sanskrit word that you refer to while you're doing these exercise, or the putting together presentation that you consulted with, or is it just based on your reading experience and learning over the course of the years?
Yes, it's the latter. It's the learning over the course of my studies, but it's the internet. Now we have such rich information on the internet. You just type in Dhamma, D-A-M-A, and you get a definition, and you can tell the source, the website where it's from, and you can get the Sanskrit word. There also is this wonderful Sanskrit dictionary, Monier Williams, and it's available on the internet. So you can actually look it up. Whereas years ago, I have a friend who's a Sanskrit scholar. She had it, and I might ask her what something means, but I was really hindered in putting anything together like this. Now there's one, and there's some wonderful books too, like the theosophical books. They have even good pronunciations of Sanskrit, but now on the internet, you can click, how do you say Viveka versus Viveka or Viveka. So I don't even know if I'm totally saying it right, because I have some old pronunciations that I used before I learned the proper way.
Yeah, because in our Houston lot, we're studying the secret doctrine right now, and in that, that's just sprinkle everywhere, right? All the terms, I was just wondering, that there's a common place where you can just go and kind of like Wikipedia that you literally just look it up.
Well, there's a lot of those that the Theosophical Society is putting out with Pablo Sender is doing a lot of them. The Theosophical Wiki, and then Theosophy World is another place where there's a lot of terms that you could look up. And I don't even know them off the top of my head to rattle them off. I have them in a little notebook written down, but there's a ton that are being developed. And also there is I should put this in how am I going to do this? There's a website that one of our Theosophical Society members, Ed Alden, has put together, and he's searched over the years for PDFs of the Theosophical books, and he's got over 100 of them. And so I will send this website. I just don't have it in my memory, to you, Tree, and then you can pass it on to others, because very handy. You can download the whole thing onto your computer and then just find it that way, or you can pick a certain author, like he's got Blavatsky's works, Powell, Leadbeater, Annie Besant, all those classics, just fabulous and easy to get a hold of.
I have a
question.
question.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Of these 7 proven ways to become your higher self, you can hear the dog. 6 of these are how-tos. Now 7, Mukmashutva, is not really a how-to. I became aware of that a long time ago, because it's this longing, and it's a natural longing. It comes to everyone, and it may be occluded because we don't have those other characteristics. And as we develop those characteristics, that emerges naturally. It's not, there's no to do on that. You can't make that up. You can't make longing happen. It just happens. And that's, of all the longings, that's the one to have. You want to detach from everything, but that's the one to have, the longing. So I just wonder what your comment was, because it doesn't seem like a to-do, because you want to develop calmness of mind, develop charity, but you don't develop Mukmashutva. That is a natural tendency. All beings have it. It just has to, come forth as your spiritual practices develop.
Oh, that's an excellent point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and I'll use that in my talk, because it's it's the result of all the others. That's excellent. You can, in terms of doing, work with meditation, because that really is the optimum time when we can calm the everyday mind, because we're in that as we live on this plane. So no, that's a very good point, Anne.
And I think that that's probably what brings every spiritual seeker to the path, because it's even, there's something missing. That's that same longing. And so it just pulls us and nags at us. And so we're willing to do whatever it takes to satisfy that longing. And that's what it is. It's a longing for union.
Oh, that's fabulous. That's a very good point. I'm going to use those. Hopefully that's okay, Anne. Those are wonderful points.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's not an original idea for sure. I mean,
Sure. Yeah, that's what we're learning and being taught. Other comments or experiences with this? Well, it's really been great to talk to you, and appreciate your interest in this, as well as it's just wonderful around the country and around the world. We have this shared work, and Harry Van Gelder would emphasize as we try to meditate, and I would say to him, oh, right away, a thought comes in, what I'm trying to do that day or whatever. And he would say, it doesn't matter, keep trying, because we are increasing the field, this mental field. We're helping ourselves every time we try to get stronger in it, but we also impact the field, and it makes it easier for the next person to try to meditate. Isn't that a beautiful outcome from that? That we help the next people, everything that we strive and try to do. So.
Well, thank you very much, Sue. I don't know if anyone that have any other questions. I will try to get the information from Sue later on, and then upload both the recording as well as the document that she's going to send out to me, and have Lynn send it out to everyone. Okay.
Sounds good.
So we are getting close. So I hope everyone had a good time off for the Independent Day holiday weekend. And then hopefully you could join us at the Summer National Convention. And then we will be back. Our first public meeting going to be in August with our next speaker, TSA speaker. And then in the first week of the fall, Barbara Hebert going to be giving us a presentation as well. So be sure to join us. So I hope everyone has a good weekend and enjoy the good weather, I guess.
So, well, thank you. It's been wonderful to meet you all and talk with you. So.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.